you don't want your kids just not to fight. You want your kids to be close. There's so many important developmental benefits to closeness. And if they're close, they'll get into it more, but they don't become nasty because there's more air in the relationship. It's like I'm fighting with you, but you're still like my best friend, as opposed to, I hate you and I hate you every day and I wish I was an only child and that you weren't here. And that it's a very different kind of dynamic in families when it's like that.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast. This is Ryan Watkin, and that who you just heard is Dr. Jonathan Caspi. I have been waiting for this interview for a really long time. I originally heard John on Hunter Clarke-Fields podcast. And as soon as I heard what he was talking about, I said, I have to get him on the show. He is an internationally recognized sibling expert, you guys. Yay, finally. He's also a professor of family science and human development at Montclair State University. He's got over 30 years experience as a family therapist and maintains a private practice in New Jersey. Dr. Caspi is the author of 4 books, including his most recent publication, Raising Loving Siblings: How to Stop the Fighting and Help Your Kids Connect. Yes, flipping please. I don't know about you guys, but I've got 3 kids, as you might know. And sometimes I feel like my full-time job is referee. And that is a whole nother bag of whatever. But so if you have multiple kids, if you really struggle keeping your cool when your kids are fighting, if you feel like you're constantly wearing the striped referee jersey and throwing the yellow flags everywhere, this episode is for you. If you're somebody who's adding more kids to your family and your family is growing, this episode is definitely for you. And I would venture to say this episode is for anybody who's been a sibling as well, because we talk about it from that lens and angle as well. I cannot wait for you guys to hear everything Dr. Jonathan has to say. Let's jump into the interview. Hi, John. Welcome to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm so excited to dive into this topic today. And it's a topic that I know is going to help many, many parents. I was actually chatting with a friend via text message this morning, and I asked her, I'm speaking with a siblings expert today. Is there anything you'd like me to mention or ask to him? And I got back like 3 pages of a text, and she's like, this might be a little much, but so she's got 3 children. I have 3 children. Our kids are basically like 10 and under. And so they're still pretty small. And so this fighting thing is something that certainly comes up for us. I was at the farmer's market this Sunday, and this person was trying to sell me this like herbal supplement. And he was saying things like, it's great for brain health, and it's, it will really keep you like focused. And, I've heard from parents that it stops sibling arguments. And I was like, okay, I'll take 3, please. I'll take them all. So the place that I really want to kick off is just like a very obvious, but very pressing question that many of us parents have is like, why do siblings even fight in the first place?
Oh, well, that's a good question. And not all siblings do, but most siblings do. And if you take a look at the research, the reason actually most siblings fight with each other is because they live together. And, if you take any 2 people and you put them into a shared residence, they're going to run into conflicts. It's, I want to watch this show. No, I want to watch that show. Or it's my turn to use the bathroom. And, and it's just shared living is most of it. And that's true with roommates. It's true with, couples. And so, a lot of it is just the day-to-day, how do you exist and learn about taking turns and boundaries, sharing, all those kind of things. And so, as kids develop, a lot of that is just learning new skills, learning how to live with other people. And then, of course, the other part of it is that sometimes family dynamics perpetuate and exacerbate sibling fighting too. Particularly the way that parents intervene in their kids' arguments. Um, the old advice was stay out of uh, kids' fights, and we can talk about that too, about the pros and cons of that. And it's there's actually research that the more parents intervene and get in the middle of their kids' relationships, the more fighting that you'll see. And it's not because they're necessarily involved in the relationship, it's how they're involved in the relationship. There are productive ways and non-productive ways to do it. And for example, one of the problematic ways is that parents often come in um, and either try to be the judge or they end up taking one child's side over the other. And once you've taken one child's side, you've actually created an outsider of the other child, and they become more resentful, and that's going to show up in more sibling fighting. And when you look at research, most of the time it's coming in to protect the smaller child.
That's interesting. When I was talking to this friend this morning, we both mentioned these words, victim and perpetrator, because in the way we've been kind of trained, so to speak, through this like gentle parenting method that we are, learning through as we are going, figuring out as we're going, rather. We have kind of been taught like you go to the victim first and then you deal with the perpetrator after because you want them to you want to go to the hurt child. And then it gets a little gray, it gets a little funny when having this like black and white dyad, so to speak, like then because we don't see like the eye roll that happened before the kid hit the thing or like the toy that was taken or even these like multiple incidences like throughout maybe the prior couple hours. So who are we to come in and say, oh, well, you must be the victim because in the 10 seconds that I've seen, you got hit. So I'm going to go to you. And so I feel like we're missing some things as parents. Maybe what is a solution to this like dyad problem, this victim perpetrator problem? Do we have to kind of get that out of our minds or like what is it that we need to adopt?
Yeah, I think that's a good reflection on it because the um, going to the victim first and attending to them actually sends a message that one, their needs are more important in the moment. Number two, it reinforces them. It actually says, oh, if I engage in bad behavior, I can get, mom or dad to, come and be on my side and pay more attention to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to get more fighting
Mm-hmm.
because there's a payoff in victimhoods, if you want to use that word, right?
Yeah.
You can initiate a bad moment, especially, and then make it look like it was your brother or sister, and siblings get pretty creative about those kind of things.
Yes, they do.
Um, yeah. And so, what we don't want to do is try to get into side taking. We don't want to make one person the bad one and one person the good one, and especially with little kids. Like if a little, and most little kids, by the way, do act aggressively towards their siblings because they don't have a lot of cognitive development. They don't have a lot of problem solving skills. And when they're frustrated with something, they turn to physical aggression. And so, what that really is I don't have any other skills. So I'm relying on these. And so it's a moment that you can use to talk to those children too about how no, hitting is not acceptable. It's not permitted, but here's acceptable behaviors as a replacement. And, to have them be able to express themselves and feel like even if I'm frustrated and angry, mom or dad still has my back.
Totally. Yeah. One of the things we're dealing with right now with our 3.5-year-old son, he has two older sisters, is he's spitting. And I'm perceiving it as it's this act that he feels a sense of power over because whenever he does it, the girls and sometimes even the parents, sometimes even us, we're like, like everybody's like, get away from that, And so I was like, oh, he just is trying to source like what little power he has with this two, bigger people who really want to rule his entire life. They want to tell him everything to do. And so he kind of fights back, so to speak, by doing that. And my girlfriend, she's having a biting issue, and because like you said, developmentally, they don't have the ability to go, hey, I'm really needing some water, or I'm really thirsty, or I'm really frustrated that my sister keeps telling me what to do. What should I do? They don't have the words for that. I think it comes in for us now as parents to be really, really mature. And so many of us, did not learn how to emotionally regulate. I learned like in my 30s as I started to have kids, and I'm still learning. So what would you say to a parent who instantly, when their kids start fighting, whether it's the young one, the old one, whoever it is, that they get really angry and they start shouting and they start shutting down behaviors and punishing immediately? What would you say to that person? No judgment, of course, to them, because we've all kind of been there, but that person who's really struggling to keep it together. If you're loving this conversation as much as me, consider becoming a Raising Wild Hearts Plus subscriber. Your subscription will land you exclusive ad-free bonus episodes. Think behind-the-scenes conversations you won't hear anywhere else. Plus, you'll be supporting your favorite independent content creator. That's me, guys. There is so much that goes on behind the scenes of a podcast. By subscribing to Raising Wild Hearts Plus, your monthly subscription will help support the show so that I can keep creating amazing content for you. If you're ready to join, click the link in the show description. Can't wait to see you in there. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, well, first of all, parenting is ridiculously hard, and we're often exhausted. I also have three kids, by the way, and we're running around. We're trying to keep our jobs together, our household together. We're just, you know, we mistakenly often expect that our kids are just going to get along and be like that. That shouldn't be a parenting job. And so then when something does go off the rails, we go, "Oh my gosh, this is impinging on me and the things that I have to do. And why are these kids doing this to me?" And even though we don't necessarily hear ourselves say that, that's part of the reason why people lose their ability to emotionally regulate. And you're 100%. Emotional regulation is incredibly important for parents, because if you're not doing it, why should your kids do it?
Yeah.
And if you want to be able to go in and calmly help your kids, um, you can't do it screaming and yelling. And by the way, and I'll give you an important part of how to emotionally regulate in a second, but the original title for this book that I have that just came out, my title was Be Nice to Your Sister. And the reason why I had that title is because I was sitting upstairs. I was washing dishes, or I was in the kitchen, and my kids, who were little at the time, were playing, in the TV room. And all of a sudden I heard, my daughter yelling, and, my son yelling back. And I just yelled down the stairs, "Hey, be nice to your sister." And then I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, this is like the worst intervention. I've just taken my daughter's side knowing nothing, just because she's smaller.
Yeah.
And it's only because I'm aggravated. It's not because of what's going on there. And so there's two things to being emotionally regulated. The first is, most parents parent their kids by winging it. What I mean by that is, if something comes up that's a problem, whether it's biting or spitting, or I don't want to do my homework, or, parents kind of just, they don't have a plan. So either they just start yelling and saying, "Well, you're in big trouble now," or, they abdicate, they don't get involved at all. And they're like, whatever. And so they don't know how to use their uh, authority in a planful way. And so, with just like my example, parents are often hoping that their siblings are going to play with each other very nicely. And then they're in the, doing, folding laundry or doing their work or answering emails, and all of a sudden the kids explode. And that's when they decide to become parents. And, meanwhile, you had a good 20, 30 minutes of kids playing together really nicely, sharing, complimenting each other, doing all the things we want, but we miss all of that. So we don't parent that and reinforce that. And instead, when we, get aggravated because we were in the middle of work and now we have to go deal with this, we're not emotionally regulated because we don't have a plan. And now we're only parenting negativity, which makes us feel worse and makes them feel worse. And it actually reinforces more sibling fighting, because somebody's getting a payoff, like we just described. Somebody's kind of happy that mom or dad has come down and taken their side, so to speak.
Hmm.
So having a plan is huge. You have to know what you're going to do before you intervene.
Yeah.
And we can talk more about that, how to make a plan if you'd like.
Sure. I think that would be great because I think the plan goes out the window, even the best laid plans, when we are in our fight or flight or freeze or. And so I think it's important for me and my husband too in our house to be on the same page. We want to be at least reading from the same book. And so for us to be communicating of when this happens, because it will happen, what should we do? So I'm hearing you say the first thing is positively reinforce the behaviors that we really like to see. So the kids are all playing together, they're all including each other, they're making up this game and everybody's being included and they're all really working through problems still. I mean, they're not disagreeing when they're playing together. They're just working through it. Then let's say somebody gets to a limit. They hit a limit. They've come up against a wall. They don't have any more patience left. They don't have any more regulation left in themselves. So we come in. And what is like kind of a protocol that we could use? Just a very simple, like in the heat of it, what's the protocol?
Okay, well, first, you said a couple of really important things, and then I'll give you the protocol. One is that we can't just wait until somebody hits the end. We have to be there when the good moments are happening. And even like the little ones, like they're passing each other in the hall, and one child says to the other, "Hey, I like your shoes." I go right over and I'm like, oh, that was awesome. I love the way you just complimented each other, right? Those moments are big and that you want them to get attention. So you don't want to just go down when things are off the rails. But like I said, parents were busy people and, sometimes that's all we can do is hope that they play with each other and then we end up going down. So uh, the way you develop a plan is not to wait until the problems happen. Most sibling fighting, just like most couples and everybody, all other relationships, they pretty much follow the same pattern over and over again. And you can almost predict the situations and the times they're going to happen. And, if you're paying attention, you know that, if I leave them in a room together playing with each other, they usually last about 20 minutes. And this is usually how it goes off the rails. And so what you want to do is have, if you can, a family meeting. And if the kids are really little, then it's just you and your partner, your parenting partner. Um, and you say, what behaviors do you expect to see when things don't go well? And what behaviors do you want to do when things do go well? And sort of I start to articulate what are the rules for what do you do? Like, what do you do if you're unhappy that your brother isn't, letting you play blocks with him, or that you've invented this game and now it looks like you're about to lose? What behavior is the appropriate behavior here? And then you all come up with that behavior together, and parents often have to do a lot of coaching it when they're little. And then you're so right that mom and dad have to be on the same team because if they're not, one will definitely undermine the other one, and that happens all the time. And in fact, in the book that I have that just came out, I wrote about 30 times that parents have to be on the same team. And at one point, the editors were like, "You've made this point already." And I'm like, "I know, but it's like probably the most important thing because if parents are not, it's very hard for one parent to pull off these kind of things because you spend a lot of time planning on what behaviors you're going to use. And then the other parent just comes in and says like, oh, it's not a big deal. Or they just start screaming and yelling and now you have to manage their emotional reactions. And you really need people to, co-parent this together. And so, uh, if you know what you're going to do, what you can do then is if it does go off the rails, is you say, do you remember what we talked about? Like what kind of behavior you're supposed to do in this moment? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And you can say, well, if this is what we talked about, and this is the behavior that you're expected to do. And then you give them a chance to try it again. You don't just say that was bad what you did, now you're done. You go, okay, you remember how we said that you can come to mom and say, hey, mom, I'm frustrated. Or you can say to the other person, yes, I'm going to play with this by myself, but you can have it in 5 minutes. And, you come up with these kind of plans. And then you say, try it again. Let's do it. Let's do it now. And then usually they make the right choice. And especially if you do it the right way, then you get a prize, right? You
Yeah.
get to spend another 2 minutes on your iPad, or you get to stay up a minute later with mom and dad later on today, or whatever it is that however parents choose their rewards. And if they don't, you can have a consequence too, which and you know that gets designed ahead of time. So when you hear them fighting you, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in, remind them of the rules, give them a chance to try it out, and then implement either the prize or the consequence or both. And then I don't have to yell and scream because I have a plan.
For sure. Yeah, I love that. I think so often it's just like we can be at our wits' end. Like it, if we let this build and build and build, but what I'm hearing you really say is like we have to be guides, we have to be facilitators. So we're there kind of guiding, reminding this behavior that we all agreed upon because we all want to have a peaceful house. Like everybody wants to like where they live. Everybody wants to be happy when they come into their house. Like I look at our home as this like sacred kind of bubble where we can come and unwind and hopefully all like be ourselves and do the things we want to do. And in our house, we have 5 personalities who are all very wildly different, which I would love to hear your take on, who are kind of bumping up against each other and creating these kind of ripples and waves and conflicts. And I'm beginning to think that having them stop fighting is not the goal. It's facilitating the conflict, facilitating the argument in such a way that these kids who will grow up to be adults one day, it's hard for me to picture that, but apparently they say that they grow up to be adults one day, that they will go off into their own world and their own lives and be able to facilitate conflict for themselves, right?
Yep, very well said. In the conflict literature, there's constructive and destructive conflict. And what we do want our children to learn is constructive conflict. You're always going to be having disagreements with somebody somewhere along the way. And, if you grow up and you do have a partner, a significant other, you're going to disagree on things. Somebody's going to say, oh, I planned with my friends to go out on Tuesday night, so you have to watch the kids. And you're like, well, that Tuesday night is my night and all of a sudden you're fighting. There's just no way around it. And so you want to turn that into what's going to bring us closer, what's going to make it better. And if you imagine two siblings who are out in the driveway playing one-on-one basketball with each other, and the bad version of competition that turns into destructive conflict is, I scored in your face. Aha, you're no good at this. I'm so much better than you. You're such a loser, right? And the constructive version of that is, oh, that was such a great shot. Good for you. High five. Like next time, I'm gonna try my best to block it, but you got me this time. And it has this, we're in this together feel. And that's what we want our siblings to do too, is that even if they're fighting over the blocks, they're like, okay, the two of us are fighting about this. How do we solve this together? And giving them strategies. And if they're little, they might not be able to do it. And you might have to say, Mom, we're having trouble sorting this out. And then you can go and say, okay, remember what we talked about. And then if you don't have plans for that particular thing, then you can say, what do you think would be a good behavior here? Now, two very important things. One is that when kids get very emotionally overrun, they're not going to engage in rational decision making, just like adults. So sometimes you have to give them time, to take some deep breaths, kind of sit down, get occupied in something else, and then bring them back and say, I want to bring you back to the situation, and let's try to do it the right way. And it requires a lot of work on the front end, but man, it'll save you so much work on the back end because, once you kind of get that relationship tuned, so to speak, so that they can do a lot of their own, negotiating, then you don't have to spend so much time, being interrupted from the work that you have to kind of monitor their relationship. And then, of course, the relationship is going to be better because nobody can have a close relationship if somebody else is in the middle of it. And you
Yeah.
don't want to be in the middle of it.
Right. As like the referee calling the shots.
Or the translator or anything. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't, go talk to your brother or sister. You know, even that you got to be careful. You want to have you want to have children sort of figure it out themselves a little bit too. So it's like, okay, you're really frustrated with your sibling right now. What is it? What is it that you want to do? And what did we talk about? And what do you think would be a good strategy? And now you can go implement it. And of course, there's differences over the course of how old they are, but there's another very important thing, and this is so simple, and this has to do a lot also with emotional regulation, is so many times the conflict, parents will discover this, the fights that siblings have is because they're hungry or they're overtired.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. I mean, when I hear parents talking to me about their kids fighting, it's almost always right when they come home from school.
Yeah.
And they've been keeping it together, and they're just like, I've had to deal with all these things in school and all these pressures, and I'm hungry. And, you know, maybe they shouldn't be interacting until they've had some food and maybe like, a couple of minutes of downtime. And that's a pretty easy intervention to implement. It's just to say to your kids, okay, when, the first 15 minutes, you're going to go eat and you're going to spend time with yourselves. And then we'll talk about, shared activities.
Totally. And we're all like that. We all need to be fed and nourished and
Oh, God, yeah.
we need to sleep well. Like when we don't sleep well, like nobody is doing well. Like it's those are like the bare minimums. It's so important. Yesterday my kids got home at the same time and it was raining out and I'm going like in my mind, like, okay, what are we going to do? Because normally we play outside, they've been going in the pool. The pool's a little warmer right now. And I'm going, what are we going to do? My husband's out of town. So they kind of eat they eat some food and then they self-led kind of like take the pillows off the couch and they make kind of this like path and they're all three playing together and it's going really well until the toddler's getting really frustrated because he can't tag the older ones. It's like a game of tag and they're like, haha, I'm faster than you, like, and
Hmm.
he's trying to tag them and he's just to no avail trying to catch these girls. And so finally, one of them said, okay, come on, Nash. And she kind of like let him tag her. And I was just watching. I didn't say like, yay, finally, like that prevented a meltdown because he was on the verge. And she kind of saw that he was on the verge. And so I don't know exactly what my question is here, but it has something to do with people pleasing and like really like acquiescing because it seems to me that there's one child in the family who always needs to acquiesce and one child who's like expected to acquiesce because they are the most agreeable child and they are the most flexible child. And so my question is like about agreeable kids versus not agreeable and how we balance like those personality traits.
Ooh, that's a very complicated question. Um, so I'll try to give it to you in as simple a way as possible. And by the way, I think, what your daughter did was awesome. And that would be one of the things where you could pull her aside later and say, I see what you did there. And, nice job. Like, really praise it. Um, and so personality and siblings is it's a much longer, complicated discussion because who we are is largely dependent upon who our siblings are. And so anytime you put two people in a room together, uh, they're eventually going to describe themselves as opposites because, one person might be a little bit more, like you said, agreeable, and the other ones look a little bit more aggressive. And so, in that little tiny difference, what ends up happening over time is that the agreeable one learns how to be agreeable when there's aggression, and the aggression person learns that, oh, this is good. I get what I want because they're just going to agree to it. And they actually end up further polarizing their positions and their labels. And this happens with every single label. Like if you label, one child as silly, you're labeling another child as serious by comparison. And you're going to see that being reinforced over time in the relationship. And so when you describe children as being very different or very opposite, it's not just because of their, you know, birth and their temperament, but it's also in the relationship with each other and then how they're compared. And the more parents compare their kids, the more they're going to look and operate in these very polarized opposite ways. Um, and so uh, the first piece is on the parent end is try not to engage in comparison. The second is uh, if you're going to intervene in those kind of relationships, um, you need to know what it is that you want. Like, what is the goal? What is the objective? Is it that you want to teach the agreeable one to stand up for themselves a little bit and assert their own needs? Do you want to teach the one who's a little bit more aggressive to, use other strategies and not be aggressive? And then you could start working those in terms of their interactions with each other. Neither one of them in and of itself is a bad or good thing. It's just the way we describe the nature of where they're positioned with each other. And what's so interesting is if you stick somebody else in the other spot, they will be different. Like if the agreeable child, all of a sudden there's another sibling who's born, who grows up and is even more agreeable, they're not going to be agreeable anymore because they get pushed over by comparison, so to speak. And so, we don't want it to become like about their personalities, and we don't want it to be necessarily interpreted as good or bad, but rather that this is a behavior that has some pros and cons, and that can be both talked about and helped with. And you don't want kids to become overly aggressive, and you don't want kids to be overly passive. So I'd say number one, don't compare. And if they're comparing themselves to each other, try to help them not do that. Focus more on their individual behaviors. And then two, think about what your objective is if you're going to intervene in those kind of things. Like, what is it that you're trying to teach them?
Yeah. I think it's so important too. My husband and I were having a conversation in the last couple of days, and it was something to the effect of how each one of our kids needs to be parented and guided in massively different ways, and how each of them is so unique, and how we need to approach the interactions with them all like very individualized. And I said, it's just so hard because there's so many of them. There's three of them. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot, And so in my mind, I'm like, have these like personalized plans of like exactly what they need and like their challenges and their strengths. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, for me, like the quality of my relationship with them. How well do I know them? How well am I intuiting what they need to work on, how they can shine, how they can show up and just like really, really thrive? And so, the studies have been done, and the largest happiness study conducted out of Harvard, says that the quality of our life is the quality of our relationships, period.
You know which one is the number? You know which one is the number one? Speaking of some old Harvard studies, is the sibling relationship.
Really?
It's the most predictive of happiness across the lifespan, and it's even associated with better health, better marriages, longer living.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great news for me, because before this interview, I texted my brother and I said, hey, I'm talking to a sibling expert today. My number one question is, how do you have the most awesome sister alive? Just being silly. And it's so funny because I asked my husband, what are your questions for this sibling expert? And he's like, I don't know. I'm just like the greatest sibling ever. Like, we both had these quippy, silly things.
Yeah,
and we both actually are very close with our siblings. Something that I do want to mention is that I'm 10 years older than my brother. And then I have two older sisters who are 14 and 16 years older than me. And
wow.
So yeah, I was like in the middle, and we've got different parents on either side, but complicated family tree. But I'm very, very close with all of them. And what does age have to do with that? Am I far enough apart? Because when I started having kids, I was shocked that like my toddler would like hit a baby. I was like, what? Like, how could this be? How could this be? And my husband is very, very close in age with both of his sisters. He's in the middle of two girls, and he's like, this is what siblings do. And I'm like, I can't even fathom, because there was never any of that with me. So
Well,
let's talk about
you also grew up a
age.
virtual only child for a long time.
Basically, I did, yes,
Yeah.
which has its own set of challenges too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so I'm going to give you the caveat second, and then I'll get into the age spacing. Age spacing is interesting. The closer siblings are in age, the more they fight, because they have more of the same shared activities, and it's uh, they like the same things. So they spend more time with each other, and the more time you spend with each other, the closer you are. So we do see this link between closeness and fighting. It's not like when siblings are very distant or very disengaged, there's not that much opportunity for conflict, and so you do get conflict with the close in age. But the other thing that you get is the closer siblings are in age, the more different they are, the more opposites they get described as, and the more polarized, like we just talked about, they
Mhm.
become in that relationship. And so you've got the combination of more time with each other and being more different from each other. And so you do get these moments of frustration and aggression, but you also get these really nice moments of closeness. Age spacing typically is linked more to being more similar, and because there's less of a need to what's called de-identify, take different paths, and you also get this sort of third parent dynamic if when children are especially as many years apart as you are, where it's a sibling relationship, but not really because there's a lot of caretaking and parenting going on. You're almost in different generations. And so you're unusual in this regard. You don't see as much closeness between siblings and in families where there's wide age spacing.
Really?
But you might, and I don't know if I ever know of any research like this, you might see more sane parents.
Yeah. For sure.
One at
For
a
sure.
time as opposed
One at a
to, yeah.
time. Yes, one at a time. And I was such a big help with my brother. I mean, he was like my baby. I like became this mama bear at 10 years old. I really was like obsessed with him. Now he's 32 and I'm 42, and we're finally not quite there, but almost in the same stage, almost but every decade, every whatever, every few years growing up, it was like I was in one stage and then he was in another. We were never in that same stage. And so it's funny to see him come into like adulthood, I guess, so to speak, and really start to just individuate, I guess, and then also like I don't know, like just be a little bit closer with me. Like we're talking about family dynamics and, more like adult things that he didn't see when he was a kid. And I wasn't there for much of his life. So it's a very interesting dynamic that him and I have for
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
Yeah.
It's great
Yeah.
that you guys are close, though. It's really, the research on closeness is amazing for siblings. And I'll
Yeah.
give you like the 10-second version of it, and then we'll talk about the dark side for a minute, which is sibling closeness is linked to so many things. Like I said, one is happiness and longevity and better relationships with peers, better relationships with romantic partners when you become older. I even wrote this article once that happier people, uh, they get hired more, they get promoted more, they're more successful financially. There's just so many benefits to being happy. And, close relationships with siblings do that. But the other thing they do, which is really fascinating, particularly in childhood, is they act as buffers against very difficult life events. So in families that are getting divorced, for example, where there's a lot of stress in the household, kids typically, you'll see them drop behind academically. They have more behavior problems. They have more depression and anxiety. Temporarily, they do catch up eventually, but you don't see that if they have really good relationships with their siblings because their siblings buffer those effects. The technical term is they're compensatory effects. They compensate for the very difficult situation and the usual negative effects. And so, you don't want your kids just not to fight. You want your kids to be close. There's so many important developmental benefits to closeness. And if they're close, they'll get into it more, but they become nasty because there's more air in the relationship. It's like I'm fighting with you, but you're still like my best friend, as
Mm.
opposed to, I hate you and I hate you every day. And I wish I was an only child and that you weren't here. And, that it's a very different kind of dynamic in families when it's like that. And it's just like
Mhm.
couples. If you're getting along with your spouse and you get into a disagreement, you get over it pretty quickly. But if you don't, you're like, oh, you know, maybe I should be thinking of divorce. Like people get very like,
Yeah.
reactive. So the dark side, though, and I just want to mention this briefly because it's super important, is that toddlers do hit babies, and kids do get physically aggressive, and they get verbally aggressive too. They do name calling and they do insulting and belittling and so on. Those things fall under that's abuse. Both of those
Yeah.
behaviors are violent and abusive, and even though it looks like it's harmless when they're very little, if you allow it when they're little, it opens the door and gives it permission for it to continue, and it becomes more incrementally severe as they go on. And if they're using physical violence to solve problems or express frustration when they're 5, they don't do any harm to each other. But when they're 15 and they've muscled up a little bit, they can really do some serious harm. And the number one source of child maltreatment and abuse is siblings. It outnumbers parental abuse, peer violence, and partner battering all combined. And
Wow.
so, we want to put a stop. We want to have a no violence rule, both verbally and physically, very, very early on.
Yeah.
And the story I always tell my students when I teach a siblings class is that, this behavior where a toddler hits a baby, or I've even heard other stories like putting their pillows over their heads. Like, I don't even know how they learned to do that, but
Oh,
they,
Jesus.
yeah, oh yeah, locking their siblings in like a closet,
Oh
putting
my
putting them in
God.
a basket and putting them out the front door with a tag that says free. All those things are a desire. It's like my life was great, and then all of a sudden this little thing came in and it ruined everything it just
Yeah.
messed everything up for me.
Oh.
And so, of course, they have no way of expressing it other than to be aggressive. And so, what parents typically do in that moment is, uh, if they can regulate themselves, is they say, no, you're not allowed to hit your brother or sister. You're not allowed to put them out on the street or lock them in a closet.
Yeah.
But you know what you can do? You can help me change the diapers, or you can help me feed them. And instead of being pushed away as an outsider, like, no, that was bad, go to your room. You don't do that. Instead, you say, that's not acceptable behavior, but I want to make you an insider. So let's, help me with these things. Go help get the diapers, do this. And then you see the behavior change pretty rapidly because now they're not feeling like threatened anymore.
Yeah.
They're like mom's helper as opposed to the enemy, the outsider.
Yeah. That's great for somebody who is like has a toddler and is having more babies too. That's a great tip to start it that young, because that young is when it gets cemented into their subconscious, And I think, we would have done a few things differently. We would have started, setting little more firmer boundaries for sure. We were a little bit permissive in the beginning, and then we began, we learned that wasn't the way. We did the whole pendulum swing of like from authoritarian to permissive parenting, and then we're like, oh, okay, we got to rein it back a little. So we've spent the last multiple years reining it back. Something I've been finding myself saying quite a bit. My 2 oldest are both girls, and they're very close in age. They're 22 months apart, and so they have this very very close, very loving, and yet can be volatile relationship too. And the other day, one was joining in on an extracurricular that the one was scheduled for, and the one like wanted to do the same class as the sister. And this just sent the one who it was supposed to be all about into a tizzy. And she just kept saying like, "Oh my God, you're so annoying. You ruin everything. You you this, you that." She was kind of like not hitting, but kind of like shoving past her as she walked through the room. So I was regulated. I've been, practicing, like I said, in this emotional regulation. And I came out and I said, listen, like it's okay for you to be feeling annoyed, frustrated, this feeling of injustice that you have. Like, it's okay for you to feel that way. What's not okay is for you to hurt somebody with your words or your body, period. You listen to me now. And like, I had to say it very like serious. I'm not screaming. I'm not rageful. I'm just like, listen, this is not going to fly in this house. And so one of the things I've been coaching my older kids to do is like, you're calling your sibling annoying. You're saying, oh, I hate you. What if you turned that into a statement about how you're feeling? You're really annoyed right now. Your sister's not annoying. You're really annoyed. So I've been bouncing the ball back to them in like really being able to own how they're feeling. And she's like, I kind of saw like a little light bulb. She goes, you know what? I am really annoyed. And it's like, we're here for it. I mean, her dad was sitting right there. We were both together. I go, you can feel however you need to feel. We are here for you. We're not scared of your feelings. You can feel this, but you can't call your sister a name. It's okay to feel
Yeah.
this way. It's not okay to call names. It's not
Yeah,
okay to hit.
you handled that brilliantly. I mean, that's not authoritarian parenting. Just because you set some rules doesn't make you an authoritarian.
Right?
It's how you implement things. It's not, if you were to punish her, then yes, that would move into the authoritarian parenting. But you didn't punish. What you did is you said, here are the rules, and you gave her a chance to sort of hear them and self-correct. And, I would add one more thing in the
Please.
sibling, which is just the opportunity to try it again, and not when she's all worked up, but, later to come back and say, I wanted to tell you that I was annoyed, and here's the reasons I was annoyed. And maybe what she'll learn also is she wasn't really annoyed at her sister. Maybe she was annoyed at mom and dad for putting her in the same class and messing up her turf.
Out of convenience too. We're like, oh,
Right.
great, 2 for 1. You guys can
Oh,
do the same class. Yes,
no,
it's true.
I write about that in the book because that
Yeah.
exactly what you said is so common. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
one child's doing karate, I'll just throw the other one in, and now I have an hour of peace because the two of them, but without realizing that maybe that karate is part of their identity, and they don't want somebody else on their turf because they could then get upended, right?
Yeah.
They could be outshined in their own domain.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, before we start to wrap up, I want to find where we can get your book and how we can follow the amazing work you're doing. I'm curious what you would say to somebody, a mom in particular, who does maybe have like a toddler at home and is having another baby. What is your best piece of advice for that mom who's about to enter this new sibling dynamic world?
There's uh you mean the discussion that maybe the parent should be having with their child that there's a baby on the way? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, any of it. Like how to, it's really more like mom centered. Like how can she prepare herself for the work to come? How can she best like equip herself for, being calm, showing up, staying regulated, setting boundaries? Like what would she kind of has no idea what she's in for right now. Like someone reached out to me. She was like, any advice from going from 2 to 3 kids? And I was like, I got nothing. She's like, really? I was like, nothing. Like literally not one piece of advice. And so like I was just like playing with that question going, what would I tell somebody? So, maybe there's not a specific thing. I think we touched on a lot already, but it's like, in my mind, it's like if I could do it all over. And I went from like, okay, I'm about to have like my second baby and then my third baby. Like, what would I be needing to know at that time if I was as wise as I am now,
I think you answered it really well. There's really no way to prepare. I mean, it's like preparing for a marathon. Like you can imagine it all you want until you're at the 21st mile. You don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
But it's as you know very well. Sometimes people have this fantasy like, well, I have 2 kids or I have 3 kids. Throwing one more in the mix isn't going to be that big of a deal. But it's way more of a big. It's like it increases your work exponentially because
Yeah.
you're also managing or trying to figure out how to best manage the relationships of your kids too, without being intervening in ways that are problematic. Um, and everybody needs visits to the doctor and to their soccer practice and everything like that. So it's a lot. It's a lot of work. But what you touched on earlier, which is if it's mom centric, it's 2 things. One is self care, obviously, like make sure you're getting sleep, make sure you're eating, make sure you're still meeting up with friends. I know people sometimes bristle at this idea, but you got to get some babysitters involved because you need some downtime and you still need time with your partner. And so the part two to that is for moms to negotiate this. They need a partner that they're communicating with and they're being supported with, and they still have adult life together, and they can go out on dates and sort of have time to just be people. Because if you're just mothering all the time, you're going to burn out,
Yeah.
and then that's going to show up in your kids' relationships.
So true. Amen to that. So your book, Raising Loving Siblings, How to Stop the Fighting and Help Your Kids Connect. Where can we find that and follow you?
Well, thank you. It's available everywhere, all the typical outlets, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and so on. So it's out on Guilford Press. And I have a website, which I'm terrible at updating, but it is there. It's siblingexpert.com. And I will get to it, especially now that I'm a professor also, in addition to being a therapist, and my semesters are now over, so I can maybe tend to some of those things. And then on Instagram, it's Sibling Expert.
Perfect.
So pretty easy to find. Yeah, and I'm just trying to get that going too. So I'm not, you can add to my follower list and make me feel good about, raise my self-esteem a little bit.
Perfect. We will. Everybody go over and follow
Yeah.
Sibling Expert. I'm going to. We will definitely help out with that. And
Thank
then
you.
I have 3 rapid fire questions that I ask everybody at the end of the interview. The first one is, what's bringing you joy today?
Oh boy. I have to think about this. I don't know. I'm enjoying this conversation. You asked very good questions, and I do enjoy talking about siblings. So, um, that's a good thing, and everybody's healthy over here, so that's good too.
Yeah. Amazing. And then what, if anything, are you reading right now?
I am reading. Oh my God, what's his name? Um, It's called Revenge of the Tipping Point. Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh,
Sort
okay.
of
Yeah.
just started that. I just finished off the autobiography of oh my God, Mel Brooks. I
Okay.
just finished his autobiography, which I enjoyed also.
Awesome. And then the last question I have for you is, who or what has taught you the most?
Oof, that's tough. Well, I certainly learned a lot from my parents, and then from my in my personal life and my academic life, probably my dissertation chair that goes back like 30, 40 years, a guy named William Reed. But I wouldn't say 40 years, but I learned a ton about, just how to be a critical thinker. And then finally, I would say, my kids teach me things all the time. Um, good things and then not so good things too, like current slang.
How old are your kids?
Now they are 14, 16, and 23.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, so it was a very good conversation, and you asked all just great questions.
You stuck around for the long haul today. That's amazing. If you have not signed up yet, become a Raising Wild Hearts Plus member. By joining today, you'll get exclusive ad-free episodes. These are real and raw conversations you won't hear anywhere else. Plus, I'll include you on my weekly Wednesday emails. Sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's funny. It's always from the heart. I don't know about you, but I'm all for inbox inspiration. So let's keep this conversation going. Click the link in the description to join Raising Wild Hearts Plus now.